What's going on, everybody? So, long time no video. I know, I am sorry for such a delay on this post, but I've been super busy on a deployment in Europe, and I've gotten a few minutes to take some time, sketch out an outline to a video that I think you guys are going to find pretty interesting, and I'll just get right into it. So, for about the last 3 months, I've been deployed to Europe, and I think the biggest highlight that's happened since I've been over there is our cross-country getting from port to FOS, or the outstation basically where we're stationed in Europe. So this cross-country took place, it started in Thessaloniki, Greece, and led all the way up the western coast of the Balkans and ended in Illesheim, Germany, where I'm at right now. So, to get started, so the overview of this, why is this important? Because if you guys are going to be Army aviators, this is something that you can expect to do in your future. It's probably one of the most coolest things I have done since I've been an Army pilot, since I've been in the Army. I mean, the sights and the type of flying that we got to do on this cross country were pretty unbelievable. Just breathtaking sights. Going through the Alps, going through the western coast of the Balkans, landing in cities, and flying over sites that you would never even think you would ever get to see, let alone be at the controls of a helicopter over. So I'll get right into it. So, as I said, our journey started in Thessaloniki, Greece. For those of you who do not know where that is, I'll put this picture right here so you guys can take a look. So yeah, started at pretty much one of the most southern parts of Europe that you can get to, and we led all the way up to Germany. Now, to get started with this, I mean, there was a fair amount of planning that went into it. So this was a 4-ship mixed MDS, which means it was multiple different types of airframes in this formation, 3 HH-60s along with 1 CH-47, which we put trail, obviously, because it causes the most wake turbulence. And the entire cross country took roughly 9 to 10 hours, give or take, and we made 3 overnights out of the deal. One being in Zagreb, Croatia, and we spent 2 nights in Linz, Austria, and more on that in a minute. So we began our journey in Greece, but the planning for this cross country started long before we even got to Greece. So me, being a PC candidate, took the lead on this planning to get some things signed off on my PC checklist, and also being the platoon leader, I got the chance to really create a great plan for this cross country using the Aviation Branch SOP Chapter 6. For those of you who are not familiar, Chapter 6 is the Air Assault Planning and Air Movement chapter of the Aviation Branch SOP. Now, it gives a very good overlay slash skeleton on all of the considerations you need to consider when you are making a plan for an air assault or an air movement like the one I'm about to discuss. So the 3 meetings that I put together, and you can kind of omit some of these. It just depends on how creative you want to get with it. I got really creative with it because it is my PC checklist, and my IPSP was the AMC on this air movement, so I kind of wanted to look like I knew what the hell I was talking about. So I did an IPC, or an initial planning conference, with everybody, all of the PCs, all the pilots, and all the crew members that were going to be involved on this cross country. And then in that IPC, I put all of the information that I had available to me and my crews at that time from the higher headquarters, along with, I went ahead and tasked each crew with what they were responsible for as far as products go to provide for the overall planning of this cross country. So about a week after I did the IPC, I did an air mission coordination brief, which wasn't really an air mission coordination brief. I just used it for a second come to the table and fill in a lot of the blanks that we didn't have answered before, and to conduct a conditions check. But just for your knowledge, this air mission coordination brief would typically be a sit down with the ground force that you are supporting for an air assault, and you guys would be kind of making an agreement on what you can support and what you can't support. But for the purpose of this cross country and this air movement, I just used it as like a conditions check and to fill in more of the blanks that we didn't have answered in the IPC. And then going forward, about a week after I did the second meeting, I did a third meeting, which was the AMB, or the air mission brief, which was the final brief before we would get on the plane and be en route to Thessaloniki, Greece. So for the AMB, like I said, all of the questions were answered. We had all of the, pretty much, we had about, I'd say, a 99% solution. There were some RFIs that we had sitting at battalion and brigade that we still needed answered, but for the most part, we had a final plan put together. I'm not going to go into detail on the IPC and the air mission coordination brief, but for the AMB, I had everything. So I started with a situation. You know, your situation paints a picture of like the overall, like, what is the two higher ups mission, what is the one level ups mission, and then what is your mission? Being this echelon that's moving across Europe, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And then obviously there are no enemy in this situation, but I just replaced the enemy with the typical possible non-state actors that could be a negative influence on our movement as we were staying overnight at these locations. And then I really focused heavily on terrain, because I knew that if anything was going to impact our mission, it would be terrain and weather. So I placed a high emphasis on that. The terrain was not so hard. I just took the big elevation features that would obviously influence. We were dealing with one big mountain range that we had to traverse going through Greece and into Albania. And then crossing Montenegro into Bosnia, we had some mountains that are some really mountainous areas that we were going to have to deal with. And then the final boss was actually the Austrian Alps that we had to contend with. And as long as weather cooperated with us, we would have been fine, or we were fine. There were some parts, which I'll get into later in this video, on we had to get really creative with the way we were flying this route. Let's just say that. It was pretty interesting. And then last but not least, at the end of this brief, we put all of the products that our crews were tasked with doing, and we reviewed them, made some final changes, and then boom, we were ready to go. So fast forward, we're in Greece, and we had been in Greece for quite a while, which isn't the worst place to be stuck at. I mean, Greece was phenomenal. The people were extremely friendly. Living accommodations weren't terrible. We weren't in hotels or anything, but it wasn't bad, right? The weather was nice. We were centrally located where we could go get coffee, work out, eat some really good Greek food, and we had a really good time there. So, just to reel you guys in, so what countries were we traversing? So, we would leave Greece on day one, go to Albania would be our first stop. We would overfly Montenegro, get refuel in Bosnia, Sarajevo, and then our final leg was from Sarajevo to Zagreb, where we overnighted for actually 2 nights because weather was really bad the following morning. Zagreb is an amazing place. It is definitely not a bad place to get weathered in. That's one place that I would be a very conservative pilot, let's just say that, and probably make a weather call in favor of the Marriott points. And then we left Zagreb, overflew Slovenia, and then made one stop in South Austria, and then overnighted in Linz, Austria, which is in the northern part of Austria after you transverse the Austrian Alps. Stayed in Linz for 2 nights, which was a phenomenal place. We really did a great job of picking these overnight locations. And for those guys watching this that's going to eventually plan a cross country, that is a pro tip. Make sure you pick some great spots to overnight at. Make the best out of your Army experience if you have a little bit of control over it. And then like I said, stayed 2 nights in Linz, Austria, and then flew into Illesheim, Germany, where we are currently located and having a great time here in Illesheim. So, now that you guys have an idea of our route, let's talk about it. So, we left Greece early morning. Weather was a little bit skosh, but it was legal. I remember when we went wheels up off of the runway in Thessaloniki, it was actually raining, but we had some decently high ceilings, and according to our weather brief, that weather would only improve along our route. And it did. We got towards the western part of Greece, really high mountainous area. The cloud layer was scattered, so we had to fly kind of high to get above these mountains until we could get into some valleys and stuff. But the weather was really cooperating with us for the most part. It wasn't like terrible visibility or anything with a broken layer over us. We were able to maneuver pretty decent. Our biggest problem going into Albania was getting in touch with a controlling agency. We had some pretty bad radio problems, which, since this was our first time, almost everybody in the flight's first time flying in Europe. I mean, we had a lot of experience in our flight or in our serial, but a lot of people were not very familiar with Europe. Most of our senior PCs had spent most of their times in either the Middle East or Korea. But it wasn't too bad. We kept trying to get in contact with Tirana radar or Tirana approach, and we eventually got them. Funny thing about this is, though, once we got about within seeing distance of Tirana International, the controller put us in a holding pattern, and I was on the controls. I was flight lead for this. I was on the controls, and he radios back and he's like, "Hey, can you guys hold over this VFR reporting point?" And like any good pilots, we just do pilot shit, right? And we're like, yep, roger that. Just know that we are getting a little low on fuel, which we were. But yeah, we can hold for roughly, 10, 15 minutes. So me being flight lead in front of a flight of 4 helicopters, one being a Chinook, we go into this holding pattern in a multi-ship flight, and we held there roughly about 7 minutes. And then my PC, who is also my SP, radios up to them, and they're like, hey guys, we're getting alarmingly low on fuel. We need to come in when able. And they basically cleared us directly into the taxiway, and we landed on the military ramp. People in Toronto were super friendly. One thing I remember about this airport particularly was there was a airliner jet that was getting off of the taxiway. Not the same, it was the one adjacent to the one we landed on. And the plane just like shut down right there. And we kind of thought that we caused that for a minute, but come to find out they planned to just shut down there on the taxiway the whole time. It was kind of weird. It wasn't really something you would see in the US, but I guess it was normal for their airport. Got on buses, got taken up to their little, I guess you would consider it like an FBO, got some coffee, got some little appetizers, Albanian style, and we were off. They refueled us really quick. Shout out to Eurojet. Those people are awesome. And went back to our aircraft for our second leg. Now, this second leg was going to take us from Tirana into Sarajevo, Bosnia for our next refuel stop. And we had to transverse through Montenegro. For those of you guys who are not familiar with Montenegro, they have some pretty mountainous areas. And weather was beautiful in Tirana. So we left out of Tirana. I'm still in flight lead. We kind of skirt the coast. We were on the land side of the coast, but we were kind of flying over this beautiful, gorgeous coastline. I'll put a picture up so you guys can see. That's just one of the pictures that we were able to snag. Beautiful coastline. And then we got to the Montenegro-Albanian border when we get a call from Tirana approach. That's like, so their call sign, I'm not going to say it on here, but they're basically like, we can't allow you guys to go into Montenegro. There is some issues with your APAX. APAX is kind of like a clearance number that the Office of Defense Cooperation / Ministry of Defense issues military flights flying through their countries. They were only expecting 1 ship to go through Montenegro. They weren't expecting 4 ships to go through Montenegro. So they kindly asked us to hold until they figured out our clearance issue. And at this point, I'm like, oh man, this is not great. If there's an issue with our clearance, like that could hold us up here overnight potentially. But we went into a holding pattern. Again, holding 4-ship, multi-ship, pretty cool experience. And as we were holding, I was kind of looking to the north and I was watching the weather kind of roll in. It was nothing crazy. It wasn't like any crazy storms, but like I just started to see a bunch of like clouds kind of forming over the mountains that we were soon going to be traversing. And one, we were in a hold. 2, this was a really long leg, so fuel wasn't really on our side. And then 2, the terrain was a little less than ideal because, like I said, Montenegro is a pretty mountainous country, and everybody who flies knows that clouds and high terrain, they do not go together very well. So it just made our flight a little more challenging. About 15 minutes after holding, they call us up. They're like, hey, you're cleared through Montenegro airspace. And he freak changed us over to the Montenegro controllers. We had major radio issues. It was probably because we were flying so low to avoid these clouds. And the mountains definitely do not help with reception. We could hear like airliners talking to the controlling agency that we were trying to get in touch with, but we could not reach them because we were flying way lower. We weren't on an IFR flight plan. We were on VFR because we were multi-ship. So I was managing on this flight, so the whole time I'm just trying to get in touch with our controlling agency, trying every single frequency I can, and I'm just trying my hardest to make radio calls and get in touch with these people. Meanwhile, my PC he's cooking. Like, I am so happy he was flight lead with me on this. Super experienced PC, knew what the hell he was doing, and he was the exact experience you need on a challenging flight like this. Like I said, fuel was not on our side, and weather was slowly becoming an issue along with the terrain. So I remember us going into this valley. There is mountains to the east of us, west of us, and to the north of us, but we were going through this valley. And our flight is calling us up since we're flight lead, and they're like, hey, you guys want to turn around and head back to Tirana? And my PC is like, hang on, we're going to go up here and kind of fill it out a little bit. So we're flying about 80 knots, cruising through this little valley, and he starts to turn towards the west, and he sees an opening through this little saddle on this ridge line. And I see a big smile on his face, and I'm starting to smile too because I'm like, oh, there's an opening. Like, that's good. That's money. So he radios back, and I'll never forget this. He's like, hey, you guys think we can make it? And everybody's like, I don't know. And then he says the infamous words that everybody knows, oh, ye have little faith. And if you've been in Army aviation for a while, you know what video that he was referring to whenever he said that. Everybody has seen that Apache video. If you haven't seen it, type in, oh, ye have little faith. I guarantee you it will pop up. He was joking, of course, but it was just kind of funny. Everybody was already kind of on edge. And yes, we made it through that little opening in that saddle, went down into another valley, and we basically just kept maneuvering. I mean, we were going under clouds, flying low level. It was some amazing flying. Safe, but definitely one of those flights that you would remember. I will say that one thing that I was comfortable with was the visibility was pretty good. So yes, we had low cloud layers, which kind of made it a little more sketchy, but visibility was good. So low cloud layers and visibilities, that is a terrible situation to be in a multi-ship, but you can deal with low clouds with good visibility. The only other issue was fuel. So long story short, not to draw this out too much, we ended up making it to Sarajevo, got in contact with Sarajevo Approach, probably about 15 nautical miles outside of the airport, came in, landed. The Eurojet people in Sarajevo were very nice. Like I said, we didn't meet, like the hospitality of the Europeans in this part of Europe was amazing. They were all excited, all smiles, asking to take pictures of our helicopters and stuff. Like they were just really cool. They thought it was really cool what we were doing. Got refuel in Sarajevo, and then our last leg going to Zagreb was pretty uneventful. And then we had an overnight stay in Zagreb. Now, like I said, when we woke up in Zagreb the next morning, Weather was less than ideal. So we did not decide to fly out that morning. We decided to stay overnight in Zagreb for one more night. We went out for food, sightseeing. It was pretty awesome. And then the morning we did decide to fly out of Zagreb, flew into Graz, Austria, refueled there, and flew into Linz. Now, I'm going to post a picture of flying over the Alps so you guys could admire the beauty of this flight. So, and then the next morning, we flew into Germany after staying 2 nights in Linz. So let me review my notes, make sure I got everything. So one thing I want to say before I forget, in preparing for this European cross country, one thing that I would urge you guys to review for each country that you're flying through, read the MIL AIPs. 4Flight has them, and if 4Flight does not have them, AFOD, a agency that works for the United States or is the U.S. Army's kind of like, I guess, FAA, if you will, the U.S. military's FAA for Europe. They will provide links for you to access these MIL AIPs. Look them over, be familiar with them. I'd say pay attention to basic VFR flight rules for each country. They're kind of similar to the US, and transition altitudes, and also know how to, one thing that they use in Europe that we don't use in the States is, it's not inches of mercury, it is QNH. QNH. That is how they measure pressure altitude in EUCOM. So knowing how to convert inches of mercury to QNH and to get that to come up on your MFD in whatever airframe you're flying, that'd be pretty helpful for you guys. And then also know the transition altitudes for whatever country that you're flying through, because those can vary based on the countries, and just know the rules associated with those transition altitudes. That's what I would recommend. And then APACs, if you are a platoon leader or section leader, or you are taking lead on border crossings and clearances, your best friends are AFOD for one, and then your second best friend is the APACs website. Get those APACs in as soon as possible. If your higher headquarters is like mine and they drag their feet on making decisions, go ahead and put that APACs request in, man. Screw it. Like, I'd rather have an APACs clearance ready to go. That way when they tell you you can do what you're trying to do and they take 3 weeks to tell you that you can do that, your APACs are already in. That was a big win for our flight. I covered a lot of information in a little bit of time. I try to not drag my YouTube videos out a long time. I try to give you guys the experience that I'm getting along the way, because most of you guys are going to be in my shoes and not that long of a time from now. So leave a comment if you have any questions, and you guys know how to contact me. Reach out anytime. Thank you.